That's right. This is a Pregame Engineer Tailgate Mayor Racing Podcast, episode number 69. For Thursday, October 27, 2016. I'm Tailgate Mayor.
69. Amateur.
That's right. That's right. Bring him in. Tailgate Mayor Rusty Wallace joining the PETM podcast studio in Atlanta, Georgia with pregame engineer, whatever, however you say it, Andrew Sherwin. I'm so excited for this episode, dude. I can't even talk.
You can't even speak. No, this is really cool. I think our listeners are going to be really happy to hear who else is joining us today.
Yes, sir. So we've got two guests, dude. First time ever in the history of the podcast. We've got two guests joining us, and we're going to have some fun.
Different locations, too.
Yep. And so we're going to have some fun here. We're going to do a takeover show. So we're going to be asking them some questions, let them argue it out so we don't have to, we can stop arguing with each other. They can start arguing with each other and see where it goes. So
sounds good to me.
Introducing first, in the red corner, or whatever you say. I don't know.
They got the Challenger, right? That's got to be.
The Challenger. Is that blue or red?
Blue is the Challenger.
Blue's Challenger. I don't know who I'm going to call Challenger. I'm going to call Jess the Challenger because Matt's been on here before. So in the blue corner, Jess Tow, corporate sales coordinator for New Hampshire Motor Speedway. And any views that she reflects on this show do not reflect those of New Hampshire Motor Speedway or SMI. Jess Tow, how's it going?
Hello. How are you guys?
We're doing awesome.
Very good.
We're doing awesome. We're excited to have you on the show. Also, in the red corner, I can't do a Bruce Buffer. Yeah, right?
I can't do it either.
Yeah, here it comes.
Here for the third time.
Third time. I've never done anything 3 times and not piss somebody off. So, you know what I mean?
I'll tell you what.
Matt Weaver back for the third time. He needs no introduction, but I'm doing it anyway. Writer for the Auto Week magazine, short track scene. He's here with us again. What's up, Matt?
Do you guys hear that beeping sound in the background, that tick-tock, tick-tock? This is a ticking time bomb that could go off at any second, and I'm just happy to be here, until the end.
Look out. Look out.
Yeah, look out.
The ticking time bomb's coming.
We've been put on notice.
We have been put on notice that we can't kick Weaver off the show early.
There are a lot of combustible ingredients here, and they're just simmering, ready to go. They're bubbling.
Speaking of bubbles... we do it every show. What you drinking? We'll start with that. Ladies first. Jess Tow, what you drinking today?
I'm so lame. So, for those who
lame.
don't know, I had my tonsils removed a couple of weeks ago.
That's right.
I'm kind of sort of still on the mend, so I am just drinking flat water because I am still limited from alcohol. So,
That's all
I'm
right.
drinking in spirit.
That's the most...
The most popular drink on the show that we haven't drank is water.
True. Yep. Now, my water's frozen and it's in a bunch of liquor, but I guess technically I'm drinking that too. Weaver, what you drinking today?
Well, you guys know that I'm just a little bit pretentious. I'm the hipster NASCAR reporter amongst everyone in the media center every week. I've got my Starbucks Cinnamon Dolce coffee with some International Delight cinnamon roll creamer.
Oh, he's
How
not...
about that?
I knew you'd have Starbucks. I just knew it. That's okay.
No pumpkin spice life for you,
That sounds a
Weaver?
little fancy for the NASCAR world, Weaver.
It's totally fancy, but if it's any consolation, it is not pumpkin spice. I do not buy into the pumpkin spice phenomenon. The only exception is when I had that wonderful trip up to New Hampshire in Jess's neck of the woods. Richard Childress Racing was kind enough to hand me a freebie of their pumpkin spice Cheerios, and that was the only time this fall season that I have participated in the pumpkin spice phenomenon, and it's just probably a one and done.
Well, I mean, free pumpkin spice is best pumpkin spice, so,
Surely don't pay for it.
Yeah, right. So, Sherwin, what you drinking on today?
Well, what I've got open right now is a Sweetwater IPA clothed in a freshly acquired at PETM podcast koozie sleeve.
Koozie, and we're going to tell y'all, maybe not this episode, we'll tell you in next episode or a couple episodes from now how to get one of your own. And it's going to be real cool. We got a bunch of stuff coming up. Sherwin
Should we
brought
go ahead
over,
and do our sentimental quick tidbit?
Well, Sherwin brought over Eagle Rare, and it's a sentimental thing for us inside. I won't call it inside joke, but an inside thing for us. We've talked about him before. Our dear friend Chris Canis, who we lost 4 years ago, almost to the day now. I think on Monday would have been 4 years to the day. And he gave me a bottle of this. as a present for bailing him out of jail one time. And it was delicious, and I loved it, so I thought it was a great pull by Sherwin to bring it over, so we're drinking that.
You must only be a good friend, because a great friend would have been in jail with him.
It's a good point. What can I say?
That's a Foxworthy joke, by the way.
Yeah. So let's do a little paperwork here, a little shop work. Every week we do this. Car number 69. It's PETM 69, car number 69. Got an older fella for you here, Sherwin. Johnny Allen, 26 races in the 69 car in the year 1960, and he raced the most. 69 is not a very popular car number, which surprises me because nowadays you could probably get like sponsorship and fans and sell a boatload of T-shirts.
Slippery when wet or something.
Right? He got second in Atlanta that year. Hey, during the Darlington race, he plowed into the scoring stand, which fell on the track, and they had to go like clean it up for a while after he wrecked. Yeah, he drove 173 races between 1955 and 67, and he's still kicking, dude. 82 years old, legend.
Wow, cheers to Johnny Allen.
Cheers to Johnny Allen. He had one win in the series. That's delicious stuff. So, enough about us. It's time for the Takeover Show. You ready for the show?
Yeah, sure.
I don't know if I'm ready because we've never done this before. But let's start. You know what, Jessica, she told me in the pre-show
It's okay.
that if I call her Jessica, it's like somebody's mad at her.
She did something wrong.
Jessica. But Jess, we've had Weaver on the show before, so why don't you tell the folks about yourself? What do you do over there at New Hampshire Motor Speedway, and what you're up to?
Cool, yeah. So I've actually dabbled in motorsports since I was a kid, really. I was born and raised in the sport by my father. He used to race enduros at the local short tracks before I was born. Then after I was born, he stopped, and we would just attend the short tracks on Friday nights. And went to my first race at NHMS, which was then NHIS, in 1999 when I was 6 years old. And then I've just been going with my dad ever since, and it just turned into a passion that sparked a career. So I've been officially working with NHMS for the last 5 years, off and on. Pretty much done a little bit of everything, events, marketing, and now corporate sales. So in my role, I actually work on the back end of the corporate sales department. So I create proposals and different sales documents, do a lot of research, analyze metrics and data, viewership and things like that, just crunching numbers and putting together things that would want potential clients to come work with us.
Awesome. Was this last, in late September, right? Was the New Hampshire race? Was that the first race you did as an employee there, or did you have one earlier?
Nope. So my first race actually working for the Speedway was back in 2011 after my senior year of high school when I graduated. So
cool.
I had an internship with them for the summer in the events department. So I worked that year, and then the following year I was in the guest services department, and I did a lot of involvement with the street team and the mascot. And so I think anywhere you saw our track's mascot, that's where I was. And then I took the following year off to work at Nike full-time for a while, and I did that. My store closed, so then I ended up back at the Speedway in a marketing internship, worked in marketing for the last year, and now I'm in corporate sales. So I just kind of continue to jump around everywhere.
How crazy does it get for you on race weekend?
Absolutely nutty, but I love it. That's the thrill of the weekend, and that's the thrill of working in this industry in general. Just, you never know what's going to happen next. Everything can change in a second, and it's the ultimate test of endurance and keeping you on your feet.
That sounds awesome. Did you, when was the first time you got to meet somebody that you were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm meeting this person?
Okay, so I had a phase prior to me realizing that I wanted to work in the industry. I'll tell you my little phase. So when I was a young girl, my favorite driver was Dale Earnhardt Sr. But then after his unfortunate passing, my dad and I became Tony Stewart fans. So we followed him for a while. And then finally, when I was about 15 years old, I was like, you know what? I need to find my own driver. And that's when Joey Logano really jumped on the scene and started making a name for himself.
Okay.
And so I was kind of one of those girls that was like freakishly obsessed with Joey Logano. And I have no shame admitting it now. Like, I made posters and I just like was stupidly obsessed with him. It was gross, actually, now that I think back to it. It's like that stupid obsession that a 16-year-old girl has, like, with bands. It's horrible. So in 2010, he was doing a meet and greet during race week at a local Home Depot because at that time he was still with Joe Gibbs Racing in the 20 car.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember waiting in line. I had waited outside of Home Depot all day to meet him, and I just was freaking out. I cried after I met him. He signed this life-size cardboard cutout of him and wrote "To Jessica" on it, and I almost died. And so I took it home with me that night, and I stuck it above my headboard of my bed. And so every night Joey Logano would be above my bed, just something for me to stare at. And so it was bad. And so I went through that phase, and then in high school I realized I need to kind of cut that out a little bit. So I kind of did away with the whole Joey Logano fandom piece. And now that I've worked in the sport for a while, it's kind of cool to see all the drivers behind the scenes and see them for the people that they are, because at the end of the day, they're all just humans, and they all have great personalities and great hearts. And so,
have you got to meet him?
I'm not really a particular. What?
Have you got to meet him since?
Indirectly, yes.
Okay.
So I've seen him at our track walks and stuff like that. That was a really cool moment. I think I've had a few moments where I've been starstruck with people that I've met in the industry. Joey Logano was probably one. Bobby Allison was another cool one. Jimmy Johnson, that was kind of cool. And Bruton Smith, I think, to name a few.
Awesome.
Those are definitely, each one has their own little story. I mean, I'm not going to go on and on about them because that would take up probably the whole show, but it's kind of neat, the little stories that come with meeting each of these, dignitaries from the sport.
So, Weaver, I would ask how you're doing, but, I mean, Cubs are in the World Series, man, and tied it up 1-1 last night.
Yeah, life is good right now. Like I said earlier, I don't necessarily want to count my goats yet, and I'm not taking anything for granted, but, on the Cubs note, I'll tell you this, and we can get back on to racing. But as a Cub fan, your entire fandom is stricken by nervousness. You're constantly under the fear that the Cubs are going to inevitably blow it because that's what the Cubs do. But I have been so at peace during this entire playoff run, and the Cubs have justified it too. They've played so well, and in years past, you just keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. But to me, when they fall 0-1 to the Indians, or when they fell 1-2 to the Dodgers, I wasn't worried. I wasn't concerned because I expect excellence of this team. They were by far and away the best team in baseball, 103 wins. And, when something goes wrong, I've taken the mentality that, they're going to go out there and win the next one because this team just doesn't lose back-to-back games. And so, just coming from the baseball fan in me, it's been, extremely thrilling. It's been everything that I wanted. The Cubs' first trip to the World Series in my lifetime, the first trip to the World Series since 1945. It's been everything I wanted it to be. And so, the non-racing part of me, that's a baseball fan, that's just a sports fan, I'm really happy. This is fun.
There's something about even living vicariously through a big sports fan for a team that I don't hate or anything that's really cool when you're retweeting stuff and you're going crazy. I'm feeling it too. I'm feeling cool. It's awesome to see the passion of the sport. So let's start.
The thing is that when I'm at the racetrack and I have to play the role of somewhat straight-laced reporter, that's not necessarily who I am. I'm a little bit, fiery. I've got a bit of a temper, and I'm high-strung, and I can't necessarily show that all the time when I'm trying to be a professional. So to me, when I clock out and go watch a baseball game, this is a chance for me to be just me, the guy that's sitting around the water cooler having conversation about baseballs, dropping an F-bomb here and there, just being a little bit crazy. Because let's not forget, at the end of the day, fan is short for fanatic. And, even when it comes to racing too, sometimes I like to remember, don't be devoid of personality, because at the end of the day, this is supposed to be fun, whether it's racing, whether it's baseball, no matter what it is that you're a fan of, be a fanatic. And I think, that's something I tried to portray not only in my writing, but also my fandom of other sports, the Cubs, the Ducks, the Saints, what have you.
Well, there it is.
Yeah, for sure. I think, for us, one of the things that is afforded to a fan podcast is we do get to act like fans. So we'll talk about maybe the driver we like, or maybe the football team we like, or the baseball team, etc. We've got homecoming coming up this week. in 2 days, Georgia Tech. So we're pretty stoked about that. So it's fun being a fan, and I don't begrudge anyone for being a fan. It's the most fun thing you can do that's not, direct human interaction.
Yeah. It's when your voice gets up. It's when you get excited, and when you start. I love that when you have that moment of excitement, and you kind of have that like laugh cry thing,
Yes.
Like, me and you have had it when Casey Kane has won before. I can't believe he's done it.
Like, I don't even know what to say.
All right, let's do this. Let's do the tear down. So we're tearing it down from last week. We've got. We're just going to start throwing these topics out at y'all. Grant Enfinger, he wins in his home state. Weaver, start with you. Have you met Grant Enfinger, and what do you think about this?
I go pretty far back with Grant. We used to run at many of the same tracks together when we were karting. We're both from Mobile. We both finished school at South Alabama. So I've known Grant for practically over half my life. And so to be able to see that journey from not start to finish, but start to where we're at now has been extremely rewarding. And I wrote a column on Saturday just talking about, how much I respect and admire not only Grant Enfinger, the driver, but also the person. I'm going to go a little inside baseball, but in racing for you guys on the Grant Enfinger story, because I feel like I have a unique perspective on Grant.
Keep it up.
What makes Grant's story so rewarding is that this is the type of driver that NASCAR fans say all the time that they want to have success. And
yes.
He doesn't bring a lot of money. He has talent. He brings his helmet and his shoes, and he just hopes that someone will give him a shot. He was running for a fairly small team in Team BCR in the ARCA Racing Series and used up all of his funding to get halfway through the 2014 season. Mm-hmm. And he used it all up. He was done by halfway through, and he was second in the standings to Mason Mitchell. And he was able to connect with the guys at GMS, and they hired him on as a crew member. He was primarily a race day engineer for Spencer Gallagher and that team, and he was traveling to NASCAR truck races as a mechanic. And basically, when he was done with his truck duties, he would clock out and walk over to his ARCA car, and him and Jeff Stankiewicz would, work on that program and make it better. And, he came up just short in 2014, but came out on fire in 2015, won the championship. And, he basically did that on a lot of his own time. And, GMS gave him the resources and the opportunity. This is a guy that had a job to work on someone else's stuff. And in his extra time, he would work on his own, won a championship. So I was really hoping he would get a full-time ride this year. He tried. He ran the first handful of races this year for GMS. They couldn't find more funding, so they decided to kind of pick and choose their spots. And for him to win that first NASCAR race at Talladega, 4 hours north of his home in Baldwin County, Alabama, was special. A lot of friends and family, but to me, just from a pure racing standpoint, it was special because this is a message to blue-collar racers all over the country that you can still get it done and you can still get opportunities by just being passionate, by being persistent, and being talented. I think a lot of drivers have kind of resigned themselves to thinking that if you can't get funding, you're not going to get a shot. Mm-hmm. And to me, Grant Enfinger has continuously obliterated that sentiment. He obliterated it by winning his ARCA championship. He obliterated it by winning a NASCAR race on Saturday. So it was a great win for Grant. It was a great win for GMS. It was a great a great win for fans of Alabama racing. But to me, it was a great win for all of motorsports, that a guy that's so well respected, like his peers. I had Daniel Hemrick and Spencer Gallagher both just say, what do you think of this guy? And they went on for a good 5 minutes just talking about how much they admire him. And so I hate to sound a little biased, but I am, given our similar backgrounds. But I admire Grant Enfinger a ton, and it was really fulfilling to see him win on Saturday.
If there's one thing that this podcast is, it's biased. So you're in good company there.
For sure. For sure. No, we appreciate you sharing. I was kind of hoping with the Alabama connection that you would have some kind of story like that. I didn't prod you for it, but I was just kind of, I guess I just gambled a little bit that you might have a tidbit like that to share.
That's super cool. All right, Jess, we're going to put you on the spot next. Talladega Cup race. Good race or bad race?
Okay race.
Okay
I'll
race.
meet you in the middle on that one. It was okay. I don't know if we're going to segue into this in a little bit, but Talladega, I love the track. I love the racing. I don't know if it belongs in the chase. And maybe NASCAR did something right by moving it to the second spot for next year's chase, but I don't know. There were so many different things that I was just really disappointed with. You go from the pack racing to the single file racing to the Gibbs cars hanging in the back. I wasn't overly impressed by what I saw. And the whole idea of it being a chase elimination race, there really wasn't a lot of fireworks and sparks in it like I thought there was going to be. So, at least from my view.
Okay, so you're in the camp of shouldn't be in an elimination race, and so what would you? So you're in charge of NASCAR today. What are you going to do to improve that race?
Well, you know what? First of all, I know this whole week has just been all about the Gibbs cars, and I know that because I listen to Sirius XM radio on my way to and from work every day, and that's all people have talked about this week. But I understand that that's strategy, and you want to do everything you can to try and continue to contend for championships. And I give them all the credit in the world for trying to think outside the box. But that has to be some of the stupidest racing I think I've seen, because I like to see guys out there contending for wins and proving that, they're in this sport because they want to win. And it doesn't matter whether it's Talladega, Martinsville, Kansas, Charlotte, New Hampshire. You don't need to be hanging out in the back if you're a championship contender, because that's silly to me. You just have to take your risks and take your chances. Martin Truex Jr., I think, said it best when his engine unfortunately blew and took him out of contention. He just had a really good quote, and I don't remember it word for word exactly, but it basically was like, I wish that this didn't happen because I'd rather would have liked to see what would have happened if we took our chances and stayed towards the front. And more than anything, I just felt bad for Denny Hamlin because he needed to race to get into the next round, and he had no teammates to work with because Truex blew up, and then all the rest of his teammates are in the back. And so, what kind of strategy is that for the other person that's involved? So I don't know. I am not.
Do I get to offer a rebuttal to that one?
Well, before you do, I would say that the opinions of Jess Tow fully reflect those of the PETM podcast. So I think we're on board.
Well, so I would shift over to the folder of don't hate the player, hate the game, and I think the NASCAR has made a really good decision to move that race to number 2 within that 3-race slot. And so, with me having said that, I'd like for Matt to give his rebuttal.
Weaver, your turn, your floor.
I wrote a column on Friday that I would offer that everyone go to AutoWeek.com's NASCAR section to get a full fleshed out version of the opinion I'm about to share. But I'm a huge fan of this race being not only in the chase but also the third race of the round. I feel like sometimes, and I'm guilty of this too, sometimes we have a knee-jerk reaction habit of taking one race and treating that as a large sample size, where the reality is you can't look at one of anything and try to believe that it's representative of the entire sample. This is the third year in a row now that we've had this race serve as the elimination race of the round of 8, and I feel like the two that preceded it were wonderfully full of drama. It was great racing, good excitement, lots of storylines, and this year, for a variety of reasons, not all of them got a chance to play themselves out. But if you go back 2 years ago, you had that very fascinating situation where Joey Logano had already won himself a spot into the rounds. He was there for one purpose, and that was to push Brad Keselowski to victory, and he did just that. There were several other guys who needed the same sort of outcome, a win, to get in, and they raced hard. There were some crashes that eliminated a handful of those guys, but I remember the racing being really good in that race. And then last year, you had a very similar situation for Dale Earnhardt Jr. He dominated that race in a race that he had to win, and he had the opportunity to do so. And what happened there on the final restart with Kevin Harvick, which absolutely wasn't an intentional wreck of Trevor Bayne. Sorry, not sorry. We all know exactly.
No, we're with you on that.
Yeah.
But, that's the sort of drama that I believe only plays itself out because it's the final race of that round. And I feel like you've got 3 races. That's a fairly fuller sample size under this current format. And we had 2 really good races that preceded this one. And I think having what happened to Truex falling out early. We lost that little bit of drama there. Chase Elliott was near the front all day. He was in a must-win situation, but he couldn't just get to the front for a variety of reasons. But there was drama in this race, but I just feel like sometimes fans kind of center on the aspects they didn't like instead of the things that were good. They were upset at the JGR cars, but I thought there was good racing up front. I thought that there were guys who were trying to win that race because they needed to. There were guys that were employing a strategy to get the best possible points finish. And I think if you look at the past 3 Talladega elimination races, they've all, as a whole, when you look at the body of work, has been very good, even if this one in particular was not.
Yeah, well, I mean, in general, I would pretty much agree with you, Matt. I think the Chevy fans that are always want to criticize JGR and the Toyotas are practicing very selective memory, because the first group of cars I remember going to the back were Hendrick and RCR cars.
Oh yeah.
So
remember when Jimmy went to the back and then still crashed out and finished 30th or whatever.
Junior's gone to the back before.
Yep.
I mean, listen to the Dale Jr. download this week, and their call-in with their little call-in segment they do, where they record people on an answer machine, and everybody was bitching about.
Let me say this too: I don't criticize what Kevin Harvick did last year. I totally get it, and I would have done the same thing.
Yep.
If I'm the JGR cars this year, I do the exact same thing. If the goal is to win a championship, and the championship outweighs a single race at Talladega,
sure.
We want to see 40 drivers trying to do their best to win this race. But at the end of the day, the goal of winning the championship supersedes the goal of winning the Alabama 500 or whatever we're going to call it on a given year. And so Kevin Harvick, what happened last year, the JGR cars, what happened this year, that was all in the name of winning a championship. And last I checked, that is the number one goal, maybe right next to a Daytona 500. You want to win the championship, so do whatever it takes. And sometimes that means you have to employ a strategy that isn't winning one particular race.
Oh, by the way, winning the championship, the Cup, that silver Tiffany trophy, that pays $14 million.
Hello. That's a good chunk of change.
So
that's not just
by the way.
Yeah, that's not just the $1 million. I told you it takes me 3 times to piss somebody off, and they never come on the show again or something. But Jess, I'm Team Jess here. I'm Team Jess. We got to do something. Let's go to the elimination.
Yeah, it sounds like Weaver and I are a little bit more aligned than Rusty and Jess are. So but that's fine. That's why we're doing this.
I applaud Joe Gibbs Racing. I really do.
I do
it the
too.
most exciting thing I've seen?
For sure.
No, but I do applaud them for coming up with a really good strategy to make sure that they all remain in contention. So I will give them that. I'm one of those types of people. I tend to look at a situation and see both sides, and I can't really pick a side because I understand why on both ends, why they would do something like that. So I'm kind of very neutral when it comes to situations just because I understand. I just, I give them credit.
I don't think you have to choose a side against JGR to still hold up your argument here, because JGR they did what they have to do.
Well, that's what I mean. I see both sides. I can see how it would be dull and boring if you're a fan, and you're a fan of these drivers especially. Like,
that's a good
point.
I
guess more than anything, it kind of rubbed me a little bit. If I'm a Kyle Busch fan and I know that he's a top contender, and then I just see him hanging out in the back, like, that's really disappointing.
That's a good point.
If I'm a fan of a particular driver, that's annoying. But then at the end of the day, okay, I see it. Like, you did that so that you can continue to remain in contention for the big trophy. That's good. But then when they interviewed the drivers after the race, all 3 of them were like, well, we don't really like to race like this. But it's like, well, yeah, so you don't like to race like that. The fans don't like to see you race like that. But I understand why you did. So.
Yeah, well, so I guess what I would say is, and maybe this is being me being too critical, or maybe too critical of a thinker / problem solver. If you were a Kyle Busch, Matt Kenseth, or Carl Edwards fan, and you went to Talladega this past weekend thinking they were going to race for the win, perhaps you should take remove the telescope from your eyeball.
Yeah, you're not going to spend that money next year. So interesting situation. Let's move on.
Well, understand something else here. Let me say this before we move on.
Yep.
They did not go into that race with the mentality that we're not going to try to win the race. They were kind of dissuaded by the circumstances. The original goal was that they were going to hang out in the back, wait for everyone to crash, and then once everyone crashes, then they feel confident that they can race for the win, because even if something happens, the worst they're going to finish is 20th. But the big crash never came, so they never had that opportunity to decide to press the button and say, now we're going to run for the win. So it wasn't like they came into that race saying, we're content to run 25th, 30th, because that's all we have to do. They thought the big crash was going to come, and the big crash never did, so they never had the opportunity to reset their strategy.
So Weaver, you had mentioned
fair.
So, but you had mentioned that the last couple of years prior to this were really good races, and those had big ones. Does Talladega need a big one to have a good race?
Oh man, this is the question, right? I mean, I think it just depends on who you ask. I had this conversation. I forget who it was with, but leaving the track, talking about how relieved I was that there wasn't a big one.
Well, me too. Yeah, I like that there's not, but does there have to be to have a good race?
I used to love coming to Daytona and Talladega when I was a kid, and when I was in my first couple of years as a reporter, because I enjoyed seeing the unpredictability, the randomness. I liked seeing the crashes, because at the time I'm a kid and I don't know any better. But I remember the moment that all changed was in 2013 when Dale Jr. got concussed in that big 27 car crash. I forget exactly what year it was, but I remember walking through the garage area and just seeing the total carnage all around me. I stopped, and this moment is like burned into my brain forever. I stopped and just kind of
is that the one Michael Waltrip caused?
Degrees. That's right. It was the Waltrip and Stewart initiated crash, and I saw the carnage. And then eventually, I walked over and interviewed Dale, and I was part of the media scrum there. And I knew then there was something potentially wrong. And all I remembered hearing on my drive back home to Mobile that night was local radio talking about how exciting that race was. And keep in mind, there wasn't a crash before that. That was the only big one of the day. They had ran clean all the way through, and then that big crash happened. And then, local radio and social media was a buzz about how awesome that race was. And that's not my definition of a good race, but I think there is a large subset of fans who go to Talladega and Daytona, and they buy that ticket because they want to see the big one. And I hate that that's the case, but I will say there's also another large portion of the fan base that goes there because they want to see 3 and 4 wide, and they want to see guys dicing it up. And so that's not representative of the fan base. But my point is, I think you do have to, the answer changes depending on who you ask.
Let's move on. I love it. Thank y'all both for that. Jess, your turn again.
Yeah.
Elimination. We had Austin Dillon, Martin Truex Jr., Brad Keselowski, Chase Elliott. Biggest surprise for you?
Truex.
Good answer.
I mean, it's hard to say. Both Truex and Keselowski were a big shock to me, but definitely Truex. He's just been a top contender in my eyes, and I really thought that this year was his year to make a name for himself in the top 4, and I think he out of any of them had the best shot to take home the Tiffany Trophy this year. And it was heartbreaking for me because I know all of the circumstances that he's had to overcome, and between everything with Waltrip Racing and everything that he's been going through with Sherry, and just he deserves it more than anything. He's such a good person, and he's a great driver, and I'm just glad that he's finally aligned with the proper team and equipment to effectively show the driver that he is and the performance that he's capable of.
Weaver, biggest surprise?
Well, there's 2 ways of looking at this. It's completely impossible to predict what happened to Truex. And, he and his team could have made this a moot point by winning either Kansas or Charlotte, and that didn't happen. So you kind of put yourself at the whim of fate heading into Talladega. But everyone at Chicagoland, when we had our big Chase media day, we pretty much asked every single driver, if you're not the championship favorite, who is? And pretty much to a T, everyone said that 78 team is the class of the field, and they're the ones we have to beat. So the fact that we're down to 8 and one of them is not the 78, it makes that a huge shock. But to me, I'll be honest with you, I walked away from Talladega on Sunday night feeling more shocked about Brad Keselowski, because I really felt like there were very few scenarios that would not end with Keselowski winning that race, given that he had won so many times there over the past couple of years, and that the last time he went into that race needing a win, or at least needing a great finish, he and the 22 team worked together and they formed that strategy, and he ended up in victory lane. I really thought we were going to be talking about Brad Keselowski doing it again, and when the 78 had their problems and he was out there in front, I'm like, here we go. It's about to happen again. It was almost to the point where I had sat down and started to write the outline of my column, talking about how, once again, the two team knows how to dig down deep at Talladega, formulate the strategy, and it didn't happen. So to me, it's certainly the two team, but the fact that we're down to 8 and the 78 is not one of them, that's a huge shock too. So certainly they're both right there. But I will say too, that 3 team, what a great run. They were within just fractions of a second of getting in over the 11. And the 24 team, Chase Elliott, a rookie, Alan Gustafson, a great crew chief. They've come on really strong in the second half of the year alongside everyone at Hendrick Motorsports. I guess the lesson at the end of the day is that 4 of them had to go. And when you're down to the final 12, it's really hard to pick out which 4 it's going to be, because they're all really good.
Jess, how many wins does Chase Elliott have next year?
Wins. That's rough. I'd say 2.
2. Weaver, over or under?
Yeah.
1 or 2. I mean, right now it's just so hard to say what everyone has. NASCAR is going to roll out their new package next year, so that could completely change the dynamic. But it's not a total departure from what we've had this year. And so until shown anything different, you have to believe that someone's going to have to find some sort of trump card to, outrace the 5 TRD cars. And, they're going to win a large majority of races. They're going to win upwards of 16, 17 races next year. And so that leaves a big question mark for everyone else. We don't know what Stewart-Haas Racing is going to have with Ford. So, if they don't win next year, that could leave more opportunities for Hendrick. But, yeah, I mean, you put me on the spot, I say 1 or 2.
Okay, so now I'm going to really put you both on the spot. Who wins more races next year, Eric Jones or Chase Elliott?
Oh, I mean, I'll answer that one, with no hesitation. Eric Jones, for all the reasons that I said before. And this isn't a reason of Weaver liking Eric more than Chase or believing in this driver more than another. I just really believe that right now, until shown differently, no one has anything for TRD on a week-to-week basis. They are, outspending everyone. They're spending smarter than everyone. They've got all the right people in place to, win all the races. They just do everything the right way. I've had opportunities to sit down and talk to Dave Wilson, who is the president over there at Toyota, and just talk about their way of doing business and the way that they strategize on a week-to-week basis. Their drivers and crew chiefs meet with Dave Wilson every single week together, the president of the entire operation, with the owners, with the drivers and the crew chiefs. Every week they sit together and they talk about ways that they can work together, what the other guys figured out. The amount of information they're sharing between those 5 teams is incredible. And you haven't seen that with the 4 teams. Roush and Penske are certainly not on the same page. They're not even on the same planet right now. Hendrick Motorsports and Stewart-Haas Racing, we heard Jimmy Johnson talk about it last week, about how he felt like their relationship has not been a two-way relationship when it comes to information being shared. And so it's hard for any of those teams to be able to combat the Toyota teams when they're all off the same page, and everyone at TRD and Joe Gibbs Racing and Furniture Row, they're meeting together every single week, sharing information, making shared strategies. You can't beat that until that changes. And if that doesn't change next year with SHR and Penske and Hendrick and whoever they align themselves with, it's going to be hard pressed for me to see Chase Elliott outperform Eric Jones for that reason. But again, I think the world of both guys. They are the future of the sport alongside Keselowski, alongside Logano and Larson. But if you're asking me about 2017, Toyota is still the team to beat.
What do you think, Jess? Do you have an opinion on
I
that?
don't disagree with Weaver. Toyota is definitely the team to beat. However, my money's on Chase Elliott because honestly, he's going to have a year of experience under his belt. He's shown that he can contend towards the end of the season, so I think they're going to carry that momentum into next season. And while I'd like to hope and see Eric Jones establish a win, I just don't think it's going to happen. Whether it's because of Toyota or whatever alliances they have, that's great. But my confidence is in Chase Elliott before Eric Jones when it comes to seeing either of them in victory lane.
Sherwin, I'm Team Jess again.
Yeah, so I think what I would add to this conversation is it's rare that we've seen one particular race company come out and kill everybody one year and then come back the next year and do it again. It's kind of sinusoidal in that respect. That
sinusoidal, the $5 day, word of the day.
That's the $5 word
yeah,
of the day.
Everybody scream ah!
So, and what'll be interesting to see is who's good early, right? Because what we've seen, I think, with Hendrick in a couple of different years is they've been good early and then they disappear in the middle and then they show back up in the chase. And we've seen JGR be awful all year and then be monsters in the chase, and then now we've seen them just basically dominate a year. Mm-hmm. So it'll be interesting to see how that ebb and flow is going to take place next year.
Yep. So moving on, Cup drivers in the lower series. We were going to talk about this anyway. I had written up show notes on Monday because I was so freaking excited that we were having Matt Weaver and Jess Tow on here, and Cup drivers Cup drivers in the lower series. Some stats for you, and then I'll tell you the news. I'll tell you the stats. Everybody knows the news, but I thought these stats were interesting. 73% of Xfinity races have been won by Cup regulars since 2011, and 2011 is when they had to start declaring whether they're championship for Xfinity or Cup. For driver, let's see, this year so far, Kyle Busch and Austin Dillon have 16 races. And this is just so far with whatever there is, 6 or 8 races ago. Kyle Busch and Austin Dillon both have 16 races. Larson has 14. Logano and Keselowski has 13. Dillon and Larson, who I already mentioned, they don't have 5 years of experience before. In the Cup Series, no Cup drivers with greater than 5 years experience can race more than 10 races in Xfinity, 7 in trucks, and no Cup drivers in the chase. I hope all that made sense. A step in the right direction in terms of what the fan base has been saying. Jessica Tow, what do you think?
I commend NASCAR. This is a move that was way overdue. Fans, like you said, fans are so tired of seeing the Kyle Busches, the Joey Logano's, and the Brad Keselowskis of the world who have already established their presence in the Cup Series go down to I don't want to say the lower series, but go down to the ranks of the Xfinity series and just continue to dominate. However, I see both sides. When Xfinity jumped on and signed on as the sponsor of the series, they came up with this tagline this year that names are made here. And NASCAR has done a good job of, filming those commercials with all of the series regulars. But it's kind of hard, I think, for these drivers to make a name for themselves when they have the Cup drivers continuing to come down and just dominate and find themselves in victory lane. However, I think William Byron said it best this morning when he was on SiriusXM's The Morning Drive. He mentioned that he loves racing against the Cup guys because he loves that he's able to, experience that level of competition in his own series. So I see both sides. I think it's cool for these drivers to have a taste of what it's like to race against the most elite drivers in the world. But at the same time, I don't think it's fair to them because they're continuing to take all those wins. So I see both sides. I do like the way that NASCAR's regulated it. I think that that's completely fair. I like that they didn't entirely take the races away from the Cup drivers, but they've done a good job delegating to say, okay, you know what? You're going to limit yourself to these, 10 races of your choosing. They just can't be in the chase. And that's probably my most favorite part of this whole change is, not allowing Cup drivers in the chase. Because if I'm an Xfinity Series chase contender and I've got Joey Logano in this race and it's an elimination race, then, damn, I would go into that and say, well, I don't really know what my chances are to find myself in victory lane, knowing it's probably going to be Joey Logano's race to take. So now I have to race and try and fight tooth and nail to get my way into the next round. So I certainly commend NASCAR. I think it was a move well done, and we'll see how it plays out next year.
So William Byron is an interesting example because he's had a lot of success too this year. So maybe a grain of salt with him. And Sherwin.
Yeah. So I think what I wanted to say was, and maybe a little bit off track, is I think a lot of the conversation has been about not so much that a Cup driver is in the car, but that the car itself is built in a Cup garage, and that especially if we drop down to the Truck Series and we see what Kyle Busch has done with his own garage. Certainly, he has Joe Gibbs' support, but they build those trucks. Brad Kay certainly has Penske and Roush Fenway support, but his team builds those cars. JRM, certainly they have Hendrick support, but they build their own cars. It's a different shop. They're 25 miles apart. So it would be interesting to see if that becomes a part of the rules too. Is it, it's not just that a Cup driver can't be in the car for a certain amount of races. It's a Cup driver can be in the car, but it can't be a Cup-built Xfinity car or a truck.
Yeah. Weaver.
Oh dear. Okay. Here's the deal. I feel like we could fill an entire 4-hour podcast with this topic because there is so much to consider. There is so much red tape to have to cut through. There are so many repercussions of any possible decision that anybody would make. There is so much that's going right for the Xfinity Series, and it's continued growth over the past decade and a half, 2 decades. There's a lot wrong too, and it's taken us 15 years to get into a lot of the problems that the Tour has, and it's going to take about 15 years to get out of it. We're not going to get Cup drivers away from the Xfinity Series as long as Xfinity is pretty much tied to the Cup Series week in and week out, 27 weeks a year. And to me, that's the biggest problem. The problem is not Cup teams. It's not Cup drivers. It's Cup tracks. And once upon a time, the Busch Series was a very healthy alternative to Winston Cup. It wasn't viewed as the number 2 series. It was viewed as just a different series. It's like, well, you have Cup racing on Sunday and you have Busch racing on Saturday, which is somewhat similar, but also with its own personality, its own flair that made it must-see TV, and it made it hugely popular. And to me, when I think of what the Xfinity Series should be, I think of Randy LaJoie, Ed Berriard, Jeff Purvis, David Green, Joe Fuller, Mike McLaughlin. Those are the kind of names that come to mind. Joe Bessie won a Busch Series race, and many of them did so at non-Cup companion races. When not naming those names, when you're talking about the Busch Series, I left out Mark Martin because he was winning all the other races. He was winning races at the Daytona, at the Talladega, at the Michigans, at the Charlottes and Texas, and so on and so forth. But the Busch Series would spend weeks, sometimes months at a time apart, going to places like South Boston, going to Hickory, going to Pikes Peak, IRP, going to different road courses. It was a fundamentally different series that at times met back up with the Sprint Cup Series, and it was on those occasions that the stars who established themselves as such at the short tracks and on the road courses and at standalone tracks were able to go head-to-head against the Cup guys just to see where they stood up and ranked. So it's interesting to me to hear what Will Byron had to say, because while I think the world of him, it's easy to say that you enjoy racing against Brad Keselowski in a BKR truck or against Kyle Busch as your teammate in another KBM truck, because you've got the same stuff. I think if you're Ryan Sieg, Blake Cook, if you're Garrett Smithley, if you're Ryan Preece, you are completely at a disadvantage. You don't get to race them. there is no universe in which those four guys or their contemporaries have a chance to race against the Cup guys. So to me, I mean, this is such a long topic, and there are so many things to consider, and you can't just take these races away from Cup tracks because now they're completely embedded into the ticket structure. They're a part of, hospitality, and, Xfinity teams can sell sponsorships on their car because you get to sell hospitality space for the Cup race as well. So there's just so many different things to consider, but I do feel like we need more standalone races, and more standalone races will solve so many of the woes for the Xfinity Series. There was a stretch in August and September, and I know I'm droning on, and I apologize, but there was a stretch from August and September where the Xfinity Series went to Road America, they went to Iowa, they had a companion race at Watkins Glen and a companion race at Bristol, which were great, even though they were Cup companion races, but they weren't downforce tracks. And they were some of the best races in all of NASCAR. You had the rain race at Elkhart Lake, and you had Mid-Ohio. And to me, that allowed some of the guys who were running for the championship to literally make a name for themselves. It's just absolutely impossible for you to make a name for yourself in the Xfinity Series when you're racing for the championship, finishing 7th and 8th, even worse in the chase. So to come full circle, this is a brilliant first step. You can't cold turkey Cup teams and Cup drivers out of the Xfinity Series because there are just too many repercussions, and you would completely financially cripple the current Xfinity Series if you were to take that all away. But I view this as, step 2 of a multi-tier process. The first step came in 2011 when NASCAR came out with the Pick a Series rule. So now you have nothing but tour regulars competing for the championship. Great first step. Now you have them not participating in the championship race. You're limiting how much they can involve themselves with the chase for the championship. That's a great second step. But the third step has to be more non-companion races. We've got to find some way to get some of these really talented drivers who are in mid-tier teams in larger teams. To me, and I'll end on this, if you have a Cup charter, and you're one of those 35 teams that are guaranteed a spot, you're guaranteed the extra money to be able to participate in the Sprint Cup Series. If you want to be a franchise, because this is a franchise-based model, no different than baseball, basketball. If you want to be a franchise sport like any other sport, you've got minor league baseball, the NBA D-League, you have to operate a minor league farm system. And that means you have to operate one, in my opinion, if I was running NASCAR, one Xfinity team or one truck team that has a championship-eligible driver in order to have your Sprint Cup Series charter. And I think that would go a long way as well.
I like it, and we got to move on.
No, that's great, and we've talked about on here
that idea.
When you hear about people like Brad Keselowski talk about his truck team that he owns, he's like, you sign up for trucks to sign up to lose $1 million a year. That's what you do. Like that's how this series works.
It's even the give back clause.
Yeah, exactly. So, very, very interesting there. Love it. Thank you for that. And let's move on to gassing it up for this coming week. We've got. Look out! We've got Martinsville. A lot of storylines here. We've got Jeff Gordon back in the '88. Obviously, Jimmy's really good. Sure, when you put this note on here, Joey is strong in the short tracks. So, or has. I shouldn't even just gloss over that, but just say Joey has become he's a man.
If he wins the pole tomorrow, he will have won 4 straight at Martinsville. He swept 2 years worth of poles.
Holy crap. We've got lights at Martinsville. We've got, all kinds of stuff going on. Let's, Jess Tow, you tell us, what's your big stories here at Martinsville? And you know what? Who are you going to pick?
Martinsville. You go from a super speedway to the shortest track on the circuit.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. Well, not to overshadow, I think you brought up a valid point. Jeff Gordon's back in the 88 this weekend.
Woo!
I mean, come on, that's huge. Everybody thought when he won at Martinsville last year that was his final time in, seeing him in the Cup Series there. So that's a treat for everybody to see him back. I think that he has a really good shot to find himself back in victory lane again.
No.
I wouldn't count him out. Obviously, Jimmy's really good there. Denny's really good there. But my race pick this weekend was Joey. And maybe that's the 16-year-old in me. But like you guys said, he is just so good at short tracks, and he's proven himself there. And obviously, last year, if it wasn't for the whole Matt Kenseth debacle, I feel like Joey would have had a really great shot. So with that all in the past, I think that it's Joey's race to lose this weekend. However, there are some really other good contenders as well. So Joey's my pick.
All right. Weaver.
I'm looking at three names. If I had to, do or die, as it were, I'm looking at Jimmy Johnson just because it has been a decade of dominance for the 48 team there, a decade plus of dominance. But Kevin Harvick I feel like he's so underrated at Martinsville. I mean, when you think of the legends of Martinsville over the past, this generation, you think of Jimmy, you think of Jeff, you think of Denny Hamlin, you think of, Kyle Busch and Matt Kenseth, who hasn't won there yet, but certainly he's a great short tracker. But I think of Kevin Harvick. I think, he's 1B there. And I think of two JGR cars and Denny Hamlin and Kyle Busch. Kyle, who won there in the spring. So, he has a great notebook for how to get it done. But I think those three, Jimmy, Kevin, and Denny, are probably the three that I expect to win. But certainly I think Joey is going to enter this weekend with a sense of a chip on his shoulder, looking for that sense of vindication, and he very well could get it too. Predicting races at Martinsville is just like predicting races at Talladega. It's so unpredictable. So many things could happen to completely change the dynamic. I mean, look at how Jeff Gordon won that race there last fall. He found himself in that situation because of what happened between the Penske cars and Matt Kenseth, and then Kenseth later with Logano. And suddenly Jeff Gordon wins that race, that storybook ending. So, and again, Gordon's in the 88, so who knows? But those are the three names, Jimmy, Kevin, and Denny.
So we've got, we're starting a new elimination round. And so me and Sherwin have been doing this throughout the chase so far. But want to hear what y'all got to say. We've got Logano, Jimmy, Harvick, Kenseth, Carl, Denny, Kurt, and Kyle left in the chase.
All winners, by the way.
All winners. Very good point. I like that.
That's the first time that's happened.
That's cool. Who's the four moving on to Homestead? Weaver, let's start with you.
Well, as much as the writer in me, who's always looking for narratives, meaty hooks, wants to see the four JGR cars be the ones to emerge, just because I want to write that story. I think it would be, a historic precedence.
Yeah.
And I want to see, your traditional fan base, just lose their minds and talk about that Japanese money and how that Toyota bought off NASCAR. I want to see that situation play itself out. I really do.
Burning chunks of concrete.
Yeah, we're Carlin fans. Flaming chunks of concrete.
I feel like Kevin Harvick is going to single-handedly put that narrative to bed. I really do feel like that Kevin Harvick is winning this race on Sunday, and it's going to completely make it a moot point. But, again, we keep predicting against JGR. I remember having the conversation at the beginning of the year. I'm like, statistically speaking, there's no way that the final four are all going to be JGR or TRD cars. And here we are. Of the 8, 4 of them are JGR cars. So, they've lived to prove me wrong, but I really feel like it's going to be Harvick and then some combination of 3 of the 4 TRD cars.
All right, Jess.
All right. The round of 8. You have Martinsville, you have Texas, and you have Phoenix. Just looking at these 3 tracks alone, Logano, Jimmy Johnson, Harvick, and it's a toss-up with Joe Gibbs, but there's going to be a Joe Gibbs car in there. It's probably going to be, I'm going to say Kenseth. So I think Logano, Jimmy, Harvick, and Kenseth, because if you look at the next 3 races ahead, Martinsville is a really strong track for basically all 4 of them. Texas, that's Jimmy's house, and Phoenix is Harvick's house. So unless something happens, like an engine failure or something like that, I highly anticipate those 4 moving on to Homestead.
I closely matched that. Sure, when I picked Logano, Jimmy, Kenseth, and Kyle. So I had 2 JGRs in there and a Jimmy Logano. And a lot of that depends on what happens right here, because I've got Jimmy finishing very high right now, probably picking him this week. What do you think?
Well, I've got. I think that this is going to go ahead and tip my hat on who I'm picking this week, but I'm picking, in terms of the 4 that transfer to the final race, I'm picking Logano, Jimmy, Harvick, and Kurt.
Kurt.
Yep.
Taking Kurt this week?
Ooh.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
I got Kurt Busch at Martinsville.
Excellent. All right, you've got Kurt Busch. I'm taking Jimmy. Jess, who you got?
For Martinsville?
Yes, ma'am.
Logano.
All right, coming full circle. Weaver.
Kevin Harvick.
All right. I love that we all pick
We're
different.
all different.
Excellent.
That's
excellent.
fun.
We're gonna. It's a beer forever. Whoever wins.
And those are all 4 of my picks to transfer, by the way.
Well, there you go. We've.
Get me one of those koozies instead. If Logano wins, I want a koozie.
Oh,
That's
you
fair.
got it. You got it.
That is totally fair.
You know what? If Logano doesn't win, I think you've got a koozie coming
I
your
think
way.
so. Yeah. Yep.
You know what? We're running out of time, Sharwin. Let's start moving this
What
way.
you got to do is strange.
Jess, there's one question we ask every person who's ever been on the podcast for their first time, and the question is always, what's the one thing that you would change about NASCAR?
What kind of a loaded question is that?
Well, it's totally loaded. If you had to change one thing, whether it's butts in the seats, eyes on the TV, whether it's something that you just want to see happen, it could be totally
New
selfish.
track, old track.
Yeah. Bring back something cool. Bring or whatever you want, or give Jess Tow front row seats to every race, whatever you want.
Oh.
Weaver had to answer it. By the way, this is like initiation,
We're
right?
We're lucky to have such a broad sport, and there's just so many moving pieces to this sport. There's so many different things, and Martinsville just announced that they were installing lights, and I'm so happy and excited for them. They really need them, especially with their victory lane celebrations in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
I, as a fan, strictly as a fan, would love to see lights at New Hampshire. I would love that because I think it would be so cool to have a night race. Now, I know this would conflict with a bunch of other things, and I know fans want it too, but I just think it'd be so cool and so different. I mean, we're a flat mile oval, and it'd just be so neat to have that experience in the summer and see what that's like, because I've seen night racing at the local short tracks, and it's so fun. So I guess that'd be, one thing I would change.
So, lights at New Hampshire.
Lights in New Hampshire. I'm fully
I can give 2 thumbs up to that.
Double. Yep. Double barrels, not Kyle Busch style, but the other fingers.
Yeah.
I'm in. All right. We got our Stranger Stang. Ashley Stang sends us a question every week with Ashley Stang with Stang Motorsports with the K&N series there. And she asks us, all right, this one's for Weaver, this one's for you. And listen, Weaver, I'm an animal guy. I love.
Do we have to? Should we ask how he pronounces his cat's name first?
Weaver.
Oh, my cat's name is Gotinks.
That's what I thought.
Gotinks. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. We're good.
All right, Weaver. It comes down to this. Now, you got to understand. I didn't ask this question. See, me and Sherwin, we're actually both cat guys, which is rare to find a bunch amongst dudes. And I have a feeling you are too. So this isn't our question. So this question does not reflect that of the PETM podcast guy. Weaver, it's Gotinks or a Cubs World Series. That's the question. I'm not going to go into details.
So basically, the question is: do I get to keep my cat, or if the answer is no, I then get to see the Cubs win the World Series, or I get to go to the World Series? What does that mean?
It's a trade for a
whatever seat you want.
It's a game
at Game 6, Game 5, whatever the winning
game.
Yep.
You trade the cat for a ticket to see the Cubs win the series
wherever you want to sit.
Well, first of all, let's establish right now that that's actually equal value. That is fair value. I truly do equate the value of my cat as being equal to a $6,000 Chicago Cubs World Series ticket, which then immediately gives you the answer to that question. No, I'm not giving up my cat. I will gladly watch the Cubs clinch the World Series on Sunday from the comfort of my office desk with my cat sitting right next to me. Thank you very much, Ashley.
All right, so here's That is a fantastic answer.
Hey, I'm Team Weaver, by the way.
Awesome.
Here's the question, though.
That was great.
Here's the question. So if we get into so we got the very first game. It's game 3, but the first game in Wrigley is Friday, and then we're gonna have 3 games. If there's any chance that thing goes back to Cleveland, and I have to find myself into North Carolina, can I watch the last game with you?
Ooh.
Well, if that series does extend to Cleveland, there is a very good chance that with those games being on Tuesday and Wednesday, with it not falling on a race day, I'm going to drive all the way to Chicago and party it up on the streets of Wrigleyville.
Okay.
You are more than welcome to ride up to downtown Chicago with me. That's probably where you're going to find me.
Okay. I appreciate that enthusiasm.
Attaboy. I love that answer.
That was a better answer, I think, than Ashley was expecting.
Jess.
In all honesty.
It broke my
He
heart
actually
a little
put
bit.
a price tag on his cat, though.
Well, hey, you know what?
Pretty
Cats
high
are cheap. Cats are super cheap.
Jess.
Listen, look. Someone, let me tell you all a story real quick, and I'll
Do
let
it.
us move on. Someone actually threatened to sue me recently, and basically, I told him, I'm like, look, if you want to sue me, that's fine. That's wonderful. I've got a cat and a recliner, and I'll give you the recliner. And that's it.
Right.
I love that. I got a cat and a recliner. I'll hire Johnny Cochran from the grave for my cat, but you can have the damn recliner.
Sir.
All right, y'all. I hate it. We got to close this thing out. We've had so much fun. Jess, let's start with you. Where can people find you?
They can find me on Twitter at Jess_Tow, T-O-W. You can also find me on Instagram, same handle. And you can find me on Facebook as well.
Weaver.
Well, after this show, they can probably find me 6 feet under somewhere. As many people as I've picked off tonight. But if somehow I managed to live through the night and no one's come after me, find me on social media, on Twitter at Matt Weaver SBN, on Facebook, Matt Weaver Motorsports.
We got a shout out. Sherwin, give us a shout out.
Yeah, friend of the podcast, Greg Whited Jr. at Greg Whited Jr. He asked us to mention the United States Marine Corps vet Josh White. He's been trying to get sponsorship for. Sounds like they got a little bit of sponsorship to run the #1 pickup truck at Martinsville. He'll be looking to run next year, 2017, with Jennifer Jo Cobb's team.
All right. Final words, Jess Tow.
Well, thank you guys for having me on the show. I think this was a good first show, and I hope to come back and join you guys again soon. And thanks for kind of taking it easy on me and embracing my silly little Joey Logano story.
Hey, the first of many we hope. Weaver, take us down.
Same thing. I appreciate you guys so much. You guys are awesome friends. And the one thing I would say is I still want to apologize for Bristol.
Uh-oh.
I wanted so desperately to go out there and hang out and mingle, but someone on the line with us just prevented that from happening, and I'm going to defer all the blame upon Jessica Tow for preventing me from hanging out with you guys. I'm sure she is completely sorry.
He said your first...
Excuse me, Weaver. We are all adults here. That was your discretion.
Oh,
get after it.
Hey, but you know what? I think because of that, not to interrupt both of you, but we ended up running into Jeff and getting him to do the thing. So, I don't know. I think it worked out in the end.
Make
felt
something
like
out of
some
it.
positive karma.
Make something out of it.
We can't wait to have both of you back on, whether it's together or individual. You've been great guests. We really appreciate it.
Y'all are the best. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we do one thing here, and it's called the Jelly Bean
Closeout Challenge.
Closeout Challenge. We've stuffed our faces with jelly beans, and then we're going to tell people how to find us for no reason. This has nothing to do with each other. Yep. Why do we do this? We still got jelly beans here. You know where to find us. PETMpodcast.com, at PETM Podcast. On Twitter, at PETM Podcast. I already just said that. YouTube, PETM Podcast. Guess what on Facebook?
I mean, Google the
PETM
hell out of
Podcast.
some PETM racing podcasts. You'll
tell
find
you
us
what.
about all of it.
Jelly beans are good as hell.
Yeah, they are good as hell.
You know where to find me. I'm Rusty Wallace at Tailgate Mayor.
And I am Andrew Sherwin at Pregame ENG.
This has been a boatload of fun, y'all, and we're going to talk to y'all next week. Thank you for joining.
All right, stick with us on the Periscope. We're going to start cussing here in just a minute.
See y'all later.